Errol Flynn won the battle, but got a funeral. This is Edge of Darkness. No parade, no cheering crowd, no clean Flynn victory, just bodies in the street, silence where a town should be. And one of Hollywood's brightest adventure stars trapped inside a victory too costly to celebrate, the village had its freedom, but this time, freedom came dressed in black. A Norwegian village has defeated the Nazis. The flag is flying, the occupation is broken, and yet the camera searches for celebration and finds none. The street only holds the weight of what it costs. That is the first great shock of Edge of Darkness. It isn't asking, will this village defeat the Nazis? It already has. The real question is darker. What do you do when liberty looks exactly like a funeral? Consider what audiences expected from Errol Flynn in 1943. This was Captain Blood, the adventures of Robin Hood, the Seahawk, a man who swung from ropes, led charges, and made victory look effortless. Flynn had the star power, Warner Brothers had the sparkle. And in the middle of a real grinding world war, when audiences needed dashing heroes, they delivered this. A village that won and can't celebrate. A hero standing in the rubble, and a price no one counted. AFI's notes place Edge of Darkness squarely inside Hollywood's wartime resistance cycle. What makes it strange, what makes it genuinely different, is its structure. Turner Classic Movies notes that the film opens on the liberation and then rewinds, scene by scene, to show how the village arrived at that terrible silent moment. So from the very first time, the audience already knows the outcome. There's no suspense about whether they'll win. There's only the slow, terrible revelation of what winning cost. And that is where Lewis Milestone enters. He's already made All Quiet on the Western Front one of the most famous anti-war films in Hollywood history. He understood that the cost of war isn't measured in territory. It's measured in the faces of people who outlive it. Every flashback in Edge of Darkness becomes a march towards something you've already seen. You watch the joy before the grief, the unity before the betrayal, the courage before the sacrifice. And you know, the whole time, that all of it is heading to that hollowed-out opening. Stay with me because that structures the film's argument about what war does to the people who survive it. And it begins with a village that never asked to be heroic. Now Warner Brothers takes away the sword, puts him in a fishing village, and makes him lead a resistance his village can no longer avoid. He was motion. He was escape. Not a prince, not a pirate, not a rebel in green tights. A fisherman. A Norwegian fisherman pulled deeper into a resistance that will cost almost everything. This isn't the Flynn of pure fantasy. He isn't swinging from chandeliers or dueling on castle stairs. In Captain Blood, he won and the world cheered. In the Seahawk, he won and the flag flew. Here, he wins and stands in rubble. That's the pressure chamber Edge of Darkness builds around him. Take the Flynn audience as new. The motion, the escape, the effortless victory, and trap him inside a story where winning looks like grief. Every piece of his star persona is present, the charm, the resolve, the physical grace, but none of it works the way it's supposed to. The charm doesn't win anyone over, the resolve doesn't break the enemy, the grace doesn't get anyone out alive. Stay with me because the film doesn't just do this to Flynn. It does it to everyone in the village. Ann Sheridan plays Karen Stensgaard. Not a love interest waiting outside the action, but a resistance fighter waiting for weapons, carrying warnings, and standing in the room where decisions get made. Walter Huston plays her father, Dr. Martin Stensgaard. Not a warrior, not a politician, a man trying to hold on to neutrality while the occupation pulls his family apart. And Judith Anderson plays Gerd Bjarnason, an innkeeper kept under watch since the Nazis killed her father as a hostage. 3 actors, 3 responses to the same question. What does a person become when history closes in? None of them get a clean answer. The Museum of Modern Art placed Sheridan and Flynn together as 2 stars associated with Warner's pre-war glamour, and dropped both into a wartime story with no gloss left on it. That isn't a casting choice, it's a thesis statement, because here's what Edge of Darkness is actually doing. It's taking the idea of a hero, the lone, dashing, unmistakable hero, and making it irrelevant. Fame isn't what saves a village. Community does. Courage does. Sacrifice does. And the film keeps stacking evidence until you can't argue with it. The hero we came to see is there, but the hero the movie remembers is bigger than one man. And that's where the structure tightens its grip, because the flashbacks aren't just showing you how the village won. They're showing you everything it lost to get there. This is the great reframe of Edge of Darkness. The movie uses Errol Flynn to bring us in, and then quietly moves the spotlight away from him. Not because Flynn disappears, he's still the center of gravity, still the famous face, still the man audiences came to see, but the deeper the flashback goes, the clearer it becomes. Gunnar Brugge cannot save this village by being Errol Flynn. The village has to become brave together. In a classic Flynn adventure, the world waits for one extraordinary man to arrive. But here, the danger is too large for one man's entrance. Occupation isn't a duel or a sword fight with a clean ending. It's daily life turned into a cage. Fear in the streets, in the church, in the family, in the quiet moments when people decide whether to speak, hide, obey, or fight. The Nazis don't just occupy the village's buildings, they occupy its choices. And once that happens, every ordinary decision becomes dangerous. Nobody gets to be heroic for free. Karen's courage carries family danger. Gerd's loss carries the memory of a father killed as a hostage. Dr. Stensgaard's caution carries the fear of what open rebellion will do to the people he's trying to protect. And Gunnar's leadership carries the terrible knowledge that even if he succeeds, the village may still be destroyed. The flashbacks don't just explain the plot, they measure what it took. That is the moral trap of Edge of Darkness. It isn't asking whether resistance is exciting, it's asking what happens when resistance becomes the last remaining form of dignity. And that is where Lewis Milestone's direction gives the movie its weight. A lesser film might turn the uprising into a pure release. Milestone lets it feel tragic. He had already shown in All Quiet on the Western Front that war could swallow youth, hope, and meaning. Here, he brings that same seriousness to a different conclusion. War is still terrible, violence is still terrible, but tyranny has made peace unavailable. That is why the film can feel both anti-war and pro-resistance at the same time. It hates the cost, but it honors the courage. We already saw the ending, we already saw the dead, we already know the flag will fly. So every brave moment is haunted by the question, who will still be standing when freedom comes? Walter Huston gives the film moral weight without ever needing a sword. Judith Anderson commands attention without needing glamour. And Ann Sheridan carries the film's hardest scene without needing armor, bruised, torn, and still fighting. And Flynn doesn't need to dominate every frame to remain essential. The village works because everyone carries a different piece of the burden. So by the time the uprising feels to be inevitable, it doesn't feel easy. It feels earned, it feels dreadful, it feels like the only door left open. And that brings us back to the central paradox. The village wins, but the movie refuses to let that victory feel clean. Because Edge of Darkness isn't building towards a cheer, it's building towards a silence. And to make that silence believable, Warner Brothers had to do something old Hollywood specialized in. It had to build a world. Not in Norway, in California. And somehow, that makes the darkness even stranger. Here's the old Hollywood trick, and it isn't the trick you think. Yes, Edge of Darkness is about occupied Norway, and yes, Warner Brothers built much of that Norway out of California. According to the American Film Institute, the production used Monterey, Monterey Bay, Cannery Row, Del Monte Forest, and coves near Cypress Point, with local fishing boats and piers helping Monterey pass for a Norwegian coastal village. But the surprising part isn't that California played Norway. Classic Hollywood did that all the time. The surprising part is how perfectly this California became the right Norway. Not postcard Norway, a trapped Norway. A gray, rocky, wind-bitten village that already seems to be holding its breath. Because Edge of Darkness doesn't need the setting to say, look how beautiful this place is. It needs the setting to say, this is a place people would die to free. The coastline gives the film a hard, weathered beauty. A black and white photography makes everything feel colder, heavier, and more enclosed. Even the landscape seems to know the village is running out of time. And then the real weather joined the production. Turner Classic Movies notes that heavy fog delayed the Monterey shoot for weeks. Flynn suffered sinus trouble, and the film eventually had to be completed back at the Warner Brothers studio in Burbank. A movie called Edge of Darkness, delayed by fog. But that fog tells you something about the film's texture. The darkness wasn't just in the story, it was in the air. The village feels damp, gray, watched, and closed in, a place where fear has settled into the walls. And Warner Brothers brought the real technical ambition to that atmosphere. AFI notes that a special zoom lens was built for the picture, using variable focal lengths so the camera could move from long shots to extreme close-ups without physically moving. That was especially useful for action photographed across gullies where distance and intensity had to live in the same battle sequence. It's a small technical note, but it reveals something important. Edge of Darkness may be grim, and maybe less glamorous than Flynn's great adventure classics, but it isn't careless. The studio was still engineering movie magic, just a darker kind. Not the magic of a hero swinging through sunlight, the magic of making the village feel surrounded. And the film added texture in smaller ways too. AFI notes that Hans Stesnes, minister of St. Olaf's Church for Norwegian seamen near Los Angeles Harbor, served as technical advisor for the church scenes, even lending a robe for the actor playing the village pastor. It's Hollywood, Norway, but inside the studio illusion, there were still gestures towards specificity. A robe, a church scene, a cultural advisor, tiny touches that help the village feel less like a backdrop and more like a place. And that matters because the film's whole argument depends on place. If the village feels fake, the sacrifice feels fake. If the town feels empty, the ending means nothing. The production design, the coast, the fog, the church, the boats, the crowded rooms, all of it works toward one emotional purpose: make the village real enough to mourn. But the film wasn't just technically or emotionally charged, it was politically charged. AFI reports that Argentina refused the film an exhibition permit because officials claimed it would compromise the country's neutrality. Today, an anti-Nazi resistance film may feel morally obvious. In 1943, it could still be diplomatically uncomfortable. The movie wasn't simply saying the Nazis were villains, it was saying resistance was necessary, and that neutrality looks very different from outside the village than from inside it. And that's where all the pieces come together. Milestone takes a Warner Brothers wartime picture and refuses to make a war look clean. The studio takes Errol Flynn and refuses to let victory look effortless. The production takes California and turns it into a village on the edge of history. And the story takes a flag, the simplest possible symbol of liberation, and makes it feel heavy. By the end, that flag is the final receipt for every fear swallowed, every warning carried, every weapon waited for, every life caught in the terrible math of freedom. Everything points back to the opening image. A flag flying over a town too silent to celebrate. Warner Brothers built a world out of California, craft, fog, and star power. Then it filled the world with fear. Then it gave that world its liberty. And then it made liberation look like mourning. So what is Edge of Darkness in the end? It's not just an Errol Flynn war movie. It is not just Warner Brothers doing its part for the war effort. And it is not just Hollywood turning California into occupied Norway. It is a film built around one haunting contradiction. The battle is won, the flag is raised, and no one is celebrating. That is what makes it so strange in Flynn's career. The movie takes one of Hollywood's brightest adventure stars and places him inside a story where victory cannot sparkle, where courage does not come clean, and where the hero we came to see is only one part of something larger. A village, a sacrifice, a freedom paid for in silence. Edge of Darkness begins by showing us the ending. Then it spends the rest of the film making sure we understand the price. And by the time we return to that opening image, the flag no longer feels like a simple symbol of triumph. It feels like a memorial. Errol Flynn won the battle, but the village got its funeral. So tell me, does Edge of Darkness deserve a bigger place in Errol Flynn's career, or will his brighter adventure classics always own the spotlight? Drop it in the comments. And if you love classic movies, old Hollywood stories, and the surprising history behind the films we still remember, subscribe to Flashback Rewind, where nostalgia never grows old.